Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up about Cliff Kingsbury and just his journey from what happened in Arizona to what's going on now, why he is so happy in Washington. What does that mean for the future? Go check it out on ESPN.com. Also, don't forget, I'll be back after the Commanders playoff game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Sunday night with another podcast that'll be coming. I'll be doing it from early morning Monday from the press box in Tampa Bay. And we'll go from there. Who knows what happens at that point. So anyway, today's my 5 things I think getting you ready for that playoff game against the Bucs. But before we get there, just a couple of things. This is a playoff edition, folks. There's a lot going on and a lot to discuss. Number one, Marshall Lattimore will play on Sunday. You probably already know that by now. I have a story up on ESPN.com about it. There wasn't really a whole lot of doubt, but there's always some questions with him. And we even talked to him. And I'll play some of that for you later as part of one of my 5 things, I think. But, he's good to go. He's looking forward to this matchup, to say the least. Tyler Biadasz, he's going to go. This team is in a good spot health-wise for this point in the year. I mean, obviously there's, aches and pains, this and that and this and that. But I think getting guys like Lattimore back at this point, getting Eckler back last week, John Allen back a couple weeks ago, having that late bye, I think that's really contributed to a very fresh team at this time of the year. That it's funny because when the schedule comes out, that late bye looks really bad. The way it's unfolded this year, I think it's been a bonus for them for sure. So anyways, healthy, in a pretty good spot for sure. The All-Pro teams were announced on Friday. Washington placed 4 guys on the second team. It's the most they've had on the first or second team since 1991. And you know what happened at the end of that year. Now, there was nobody on the first team All-Pro, but 4 were on second team. That's Terry McLaurin, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, and Austin Eckler as a kick return specialist. And Eckler was really good in that role. And I think that's one of the things that is an underrated part of him coming back. I think he'll have a good game Sunday. I think that kick return stuff is very important. Louvu made a tremendous impact. He's the guy that when they signed him, I thought he could make the biggest impact, and he did. Wagner with his leadership, but he showed that he still has a lot left. And then McLaurin has been just terrific all year. Finally has that quarterback that he can get in rhythm with, and it shows what he can do. And also using him more in the red zone. What a concept. Anyways, for Wagner, this is the 11th straight year that he has made first or second team All-Pro en route to Canton at some point. So the others who have done that, Reggie White 13 times, Jim Otto 12, Anthony Munoz 11, Jerry Rice 11, Bruce Smith 11. If there was an omission there, if you could have made a case for Jeremy Reeves and special teams, he's been very good. And the funny thing is, I don't know that he's made some of the splash plays. It's really what teams do to try to take him away. And there are times where he's got 2 and 3 guys coming at him. So that's his impact goes beyond just whatever his numbers are. His impact is a trickle down to others. Nick Ballore, very good there too. But Jeremy Reeves, he's made it before a couple years ago, but he did not get this time. I think he warranted a strong case. Now, it's hard to know because I don't watch all the special teams, and I don't know how many people really do, but I do know that he's been very effective, and I think it's because the attention that gets paid to him that opens it up for others around him. So there we go. All right, so let's get to the 5 things I think. I think, number one, it goes without saying that this team is dramatically different than they were at the beginning of the season. It's funny because when you look back at that time, we didn't know where this team was going to go. They had a new quarterback. They had a new defense. There were so many new parts to what was going on here. And I just think it's, it was first game, and I think it was a tough game to have as an opener against a Todd Bowles defense, an experienced quarterback with experienced receivers. It was not an ideal way to open the season. And I can tell you, I think they're pretty happy getting this matchup. Not that they think that Tampa Bay is bad, but I think they wanted to go out there and show this is how different they are. And when it's funny because Dan Quinn was asked about being an underdog the other day. He wasn't going to bite on that. He's just like, hey, my guys are going to fight. And that's all he wanted to say about that. So dramatically different. And there's a couple things that really have stood out to me. It's the way they handled that loss that to me really kind of resonated or set the tone for the season. Now, you set the tone with that messaging long before you get to this point, right? But I just think it's the consistency of the message from Dan Quinn after the games, what they're focusing on, and just how he approaches it. It wasn't a, oh, we played off all that. It's like, hey, this is one of the things he said is our team is going to improve significantly moving forward. And he was right. You know, after the game, again, I think he said that one of the things they had to do is detach from emotions. And I want to read you some stuff. This is the other guy that really jumped out to me after that game was Joe Witt. When we talked to him a few days later, I think it was dramatic kind of what he was talking about. Is a lot about, earning things, accountability. And, he said, just some of the things that he talked about from the game. But one of the things that really stood out to me with him was somebody asked like, hey, it was basically your first game as a new defense. Is that part of it? And he's like, he didn't want to hear that excuse at all. And I think he was, it's like whether it's game 1 or 17, it doesn't matter. You've got to be ready to go. And and he felt like they weren't. And he also put a lot of the onus on him. And he said, it goes, the standard is the standard. It's game 1, game 17. We talked about putting them in stressful situations. We get to the stadium. Okay, got to communicate the same way, do it on the practice field. So I've got to do a better job demanding it. And I hear it the way it should be said in the walkthroughs and in practice. So in other words, he put a lot on him, but the point is the standard was what was that he was talking about. And I think that to me is what really jumps out, because there are definitely some coaches like, yeah, we're going to get better and all that. They didn't sit up there and make excuses. They didn't say, hey, this is a new team. Quinn was like, hey, very resolute. We're going to improve. Joe Witt was very resolute. It has nothing to do with being the first game. We've got to play better. That's how you raise standards and expectations, by doing that. And again, he put some of the onus on himself for, he said maybe, in practices, maybe the way he had to conduct, to listen to make sure they're getting all the communications down. That's his job. But it was the accountability for himself, but also the expectations for the players and the performance. So that's where I feel like this thing really was a good message throughout the year. Even like, next week they beat the Giants, and they didn't come in there and say like, oh, this is great. This is great. I mean, they were happy with the win, but Quinn knew, and he even said like, they have to play better. They had to finish better in the red zone. They had to do that better. So this is where, when you get to this point, I think when you create expectations and standards, when you get to that 3-game losing streak, if you adhere to those standards, then you're able to emerge in a good way. And they won, 4 in a row after that. So 5 in a row after that. So that's a really good way. That's how you know when you have the kind of team you do. If you get punched in the mouth, how do you respond? But I think you respond when you have a consistent message. You also have good players. You have to have a good quarterback. You have to have all that. But I think the messaging is important as well. And I think that makes a big difference. Then, you look at this team and what they've been through, just roster turnover. Like, I think it's like 32, 33 new guys on the roster at this point compared to last year. That's a hefty turnover. These guys, and that's why these guys aren't tethered to the past of what happened here. You have a handful of guys who understand how bad it's been. Tressway, McLaurin, Reeves, Sam Cosmi. There are a handful of guys who understand that, but most guys do not. They're not they're not burdened by the past or what happened here a few years ago. They maybe saw it from the outside, but they're not burdened by it the way that others maybe would have been in the past, or maybe the way they weren't. They embraced what they had and they went forward. And I think that's a good thing. Then you look at how this team was in close games. I mean, I think you see what you can do in those situations. They always came through in the last 4 weeks. New Orleans, 2-point conversion. Philly, you make the late touchdown pass to Jamison Crowder. Atlanta, touchdown in overtime. Dallas, touchdown 2 seconds left to Terry McLaurin. When you do that consistently, there's a reason for that. It's not about luck. It's about preparation, and it's about belief. And I think, this is something that really, I think, galvanizes them and also can help them in the postseason. This is what Terry McLaurin had to say about that.
A lot of times teams possibly struggle in those gotta-have-it situations, or those 2-minute, crunch time moments. And for us, we've had plenty of experience over the course of the season having success in those moments, whether it's drives before halftime, drives at the end of the game, having to come back and put points on the board, getting a stop, the defense had to do in New Orleans. So we've seen just about every scenario there is, and I guarantee in the playoffs is going to be something different. But I think we're battle tested and ready for those moments, and the fact that we practice them at a high level and execute them at a high level gives us confidence going into the game that we can do it again.
Now, let me say this. This is where the wisdom of having veterans like Bobby Wagner around can help, because one thing he knows is if you don't apply these lessons, is it going to make a difference? Because here's what he said about playing all those close games and what it means in the postseason.
I think it don't matter if we don't apply it, you know what I'm saying? So, we've been testing in different games. We've gained some experience that most teams wouldn't have, especially this early on. So, now is the time to apply it.
So the bottom line is what we've seen this year going from week 1 to now is that they are ahead of schedule. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to just go from 12 wins to 14 to Super Bowls in a couple years. But in terms of how they want to build the culture here, in terms of setting the expectation, the standards, finding the quarterback, finding the right coach, coaching staff, having the right GM, they are light years ahead of where they were at this time a year ago. Think back to that time, what your thoughts were about this franchise and where things could go. Look at where it is now. Think back 2 years ago and look at the difference to now. It's an unbelievable transformation. And it started with the sale of the team, hiring Adam Peters, hiring Dan Quinn, drafting Jaden Daniels, and making a lot of good moves in between. So that's why I say they are ahead of schedule. It doesn't mean, again, that they're going to go out and win Super Bowls next year. But I think in terms of what they're building and the people they're looking for, they're in a really, really good spot. You sign up for something, forget about it after the trial period ends, then you're charged month after month after month. The subscriptions are there, but you're not using them. In fact, I just learned that 85% of people have at least one paid subscription going unused each month. Thanks to Rocket Money, I can see all of my subscriptions in one place and cancel the ones I'm not using anymore. And now I'm saving more money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/gameon today. That's rocketmoney.com/gameon. rocketmoney.com/gameon. Number 2, in hindsight, I think Jaden Daniels looked like a rookie in the opener. And it's funny, and I say that in hindsight because most of the year it's like I kept saying, well, he's never really looked like a rookie. And then you go back and you watch the first game again, like, oh, okay, he kind of looked like a rookie. You know, his first play, it's a little swing pass to Brian Robinson. He throws it behind him, turns out to be a fumble. They lose like 20 yards, and it could have been a 5-10 yard gain if he hits them in stride. It's a little swing pass. You have a safety coming down. Maybe he breaks the tackle, gets 5-10 yards, but instead it's a negative play. And, it's a little bit of, I don't know if it's jitters or whatever it was, just a bad throw, and you move on. But there are other times where in that game on scrambles, he had a handful of scrambles. In fact, he had 7 scrambles for 77 yards. That was good. He hurt him on the ground. But the problem was, and after the game, what do you remember Dan Quinn saying? Eyes up. He needs to keep his eyes downfield. And I think that's something that, that's where a major area of improvement. And I give him a lot of credit for doing it in season to really get to do that. I'm telling you, go back and watch 2012 and RG3, he did not do that. And it took a long time to get him out of that. In fact, the next training camp, that was a big point of emphasis in camp as he was recovering when he was getting back, is they'd work on the side with running and just keeping your eyes upfield. You didn't see that with Jaden Daniels. They talked to him about it and he did it. He implemented it, but that's the difference. And that's why this young man is really mature about his game and his approach, but it's why he's going to have a long career. But of those 7 scrambles, there were 3 times where if you keep your eyes upfield, you got a big play available to you. One time could have been a touchdown. Now he's running to his left. You have McLaurin kind of stopped and came back and then cut back. Defensive back fell down. He's open running down the field. Now Jaden's running to his left. It would have been a tough throw to get it there. However, may have been able to do that. So we'll see. But the bottom line is he's much better at that now because before I'm telling you, it was 5 to 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He was tucking the ball, eyes were down, looking to run, and that's why it became a point of emphasis. That's where some of that rookie part came from. But there were a couple throws too in that game where it's like, okay, in subsequent games, you saw him pulling the trigger faster. In that game, it wasn't happening quite as fast all the time. So I just think there were some little things, but I think the poise and the maturity were always beyond what he was, beyond what a rookie would be. And we're talking for a rookie, it was really it's like one game because the next game he leads a touchdown drive, a field goal drive, and had a really good game against the Giants outside of the red zone. So but you're allowed to have those games. And when you're facing a Todd Bowles defense in your first game, it's tough. And it wasn't like he was lost. That's why I say it didn't always look like that. But when you look back, there were definitely moments where you say, okay, and the reason why you can see it too is because of how far he has come in since then. And it's just, he looks, there's no chance he looks like a rookie now. So, and I also think there was something on that last drive too. And I know players talked about this after the game that they said they had a chance to do something here in that last drive. Now, of course, they weren't going to come back and win at that, but they knew those players in the huddle, Cosme, those guys understood. Could you build some momentum? Could you it was a chance to start building something, as they said, and just kind of work to that. And that drive, and it was how many weeks before they actually punted again. So that drive, I think spoke volumes about what they were trying to do, that the game was over. It's 37-14 or whatever it was, but they still went down and they got a touchdown. It was a good drive, a good way to finish the game for them and a chance to build on something. And they understood, I'll be honest, after the game, I think those guys understood that aspect. So, I think what we also learned about Daniels in that game and subsequent games, like you look over the last 4 weeks and how he is, and just in 2-minute situations, in end of the game situations, in those tight, tense situations, he's very calm and collected. And this is Nikki Javala asked him about his ability to compartmentalize and what that means to his game. Here's what he had to say.
It's something that you got to learn. You got to learn to not let bad plays stack on top of the bad plays. If you have a bad play, you move on to the next play. And you can't really focus on anything that's in the past. You got to worry about the present and be where your feet are.
And how does that help you in these late game drives, these 2-minute drives?
It just helps you throughout the whole game. Honestly, if I miss a throw on third down, you can't go back and relive that throw. You got to move on. So it's not really just the late game situations. I guess that's where it shows up, but it's really throughout the whole game and, how I treat life.
All right, number 3. I think it will be fun to watch Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans go at it. So they battled over the years since Lattimore's entered the league in 2017 with the New Orleans Saints. They've had 13 meetings. And now this is according to our ESPN Sports and Information Group. So in those 13 meetings, Mike Evans in those games, not just matchup against Lattimore, but in those games, he's only averaged 43.6 yards per contest. One 100-yard game going against the Saints during when Lattimore's been on the field. Again, they're not always matched up in that situation. In the last 8 games, according to the Sports Information Group, he's caught only 7 of 17 targets when Lattimore is the nearest defender. He makes a difference. That's the point. Press coverage 76% of the time. Now, when I watched the first game this year between the Saints and the Bucs, because Lattimore is obviously facing them, they didn't line up against each other very often. The Bucs will move Evans around, and sometimes he's the number 3 receiver he's the inside receiver on one side. He's moving out wide left. They'll run out a bunch, etc. So they do a lot of things with him to move him around. I don't know if Washington will have Lattimore travel with him. It would make sense because clearly he likes the matchup, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I think he's good. And who else would you want on him? Mike Samerstil is very good. There's a size disadvantage. There's a big size disadvantage for Samerstil. So it would make sense to have Lattimore travel when you're in certain situations. So it doesn't mean all the time, but it would make sense at times to be able to do that. And now we all know there's another history there too. Evans has been suspended twice for one game because of how he's responded to, or what he's done to Lattimore. And Lattimore was fined one time, 10,500 for shoving him one time. So clearly Lattimore knows how to get to Evans. And I think it'll be interesting to see. Like, that doesn't mean you sit there and that's not your game. It's just part of who Lattimore is. He's a very determined quarterback, confident quarterback. And I think he's probably going to let you know it. And maybe that, some guys don't like it and it gets them out of their game. So be it. But I don't think he's doing this I think he's doing it just because this is how he likes to play. And I think it's annoyed the hell out of Evans, and whatever he's done has not worked for Tampa. So, yeah, I think the one thing too that I think is it's the mindset of Lattimore when you look at these matchups. Like, these are the ones he wants. This is why you want guys like this on your team. And it's why it's good for them if he can be healthy and play this whole game, and then if they win this game, play the next week, and then be a key part of this team going forward the next 2 years because of the mindset he has. And I just don't think you have a lot of guys that have his mindset on defense. I think it's really good paired with Mike Samuelson. I mean, they're different style of guys, different style of their mindset, though, is very good competitors and smart corners. They are very different people, but they have similar mindsets, I think, on the field. But I think nobody has quite the dog in him like Lattimore. In fact, let's hear what he has to say. We talked to him on Friday for a little more than a minute. He's not a big fan of talking to media. That's okay. You don't have to be, but we appreciate him talking to us for 4 questions. That's good. And this is what he had to say when asked about the matchup with Evans, how his hamstring is feeling, and how much he looks forward to these matchups. I think that tells you a little bit about his mindset.
So obviously, Mike Evans, you have a storied history. What's your initial thoughts kind of on rekindling that rivalry this weekend?
Just another game, just to help my team, go out there and help my team. Really, I'm just trying to lock them down, all the other stuff. It is what it is. If it come, it come. If it don't, I'm just here to, help my team win.
I know it's got physical in the past, but how much of that competition between you and him is really about the physical part? How much of it is trying to win that mental game against each other as competitors?
I mean, I want to be physical just off the simple fact of what happened, of course. But I want to be physical with anybody, but it's just an extra level of it, just because of the past and all that. But it's just really just being out there. It ain't really about the mental game. With me, it's just like you gonna know I'm here.
How does the hamstring feel, and especially compared to when you came back the first time?
I feel good. I don't have no problems right now. So I won't really know until I get out there all the way.
That's one.
Do you enjoy big matchups like the one this weekend against Mike, or I know you were up with AJ earlier in the season? Like, do you get up for those?
Them the ones I want. That's it. The best versus the best, and that's what I look forward to. Us going against top opponents. I don't want nobody. They gonna be like, oh, he wasn't really that good. So I want people that's known to be good. You know what I'm saying? And see how I line up against them. That's what it is.
So I think, like I said, I think that mindset can help rub off on other guys. I don't think Mike Samuelson is going to turn into some quote unquote dog. I just think when you have 2 competitors like that on either side of the ball, or either side of the field, like, that makes a big difference. And I think, look back at the first game, it was St. Juste and Emmanuel Forbes out there at corner, starting at corner, and Samuel still was inside. And so it's a dramatically different look for this defense. And just in terms of the confidence and the swagger, maybe that you play with it at those positions that you did not have in the opener. Now, it's not like, I think people think that St. Juste had this horrible game that opener. He did not. He almost had a pick. He did give up 2 touchdowns to Evans, one of which was a perfect dime by Baker Mayfield. Another one was you had a Hall of Fame receiver up from the 1-yard line creating position against a guy who's, kind of an average cornerback, right? So good job by Evans, but there was, the point is he wasn't horrible. There were things that I thought Chris Godwin was a way more effective receiver in that game. And, but bottom line is you're better now with Lattimore, and you're better with Samuelson, who is a much better player than he was in that game, much better. And so I think they're in a stronger position because of that, but it's also, like I said, it's the mindset, it's the competitiveness. You're going on the road in the playoffs. You're facing a top passing game. You want to have guys are going to compete, and that's what those 2 will do. And I think that's a good thing for them to have. I think it's just, I think he can change some things for you, but I think and Sam was still too, he's a versatile corner in that he clearly can play inside And now we've seen that he can clearly play outside. Whether that's his future home or not, I don't know. It will all depend on how they view this corner class in the draft or free agency. Do you get another guy? What do you do? Bottom line is, though, you have a guy who can do what you need him to do because of his approach, because of the way he competes. And now, as long as Lattimore's healthy, you have another guy who can compete like hell as well. So again, those are the kind of guys you want when you're trying to win a playoff game, is guys who just are really intense competitors. And I think that's what they have.
Playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is a key to winning in the playoffs, and you can score big by betting on them at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score 6. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code KEIM, K-E-I-M. That's code KEIM for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino Resort, Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 160 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Number 4, I think the Bucs O is really good, and it's going to pose a problem for the Washington defense. Not impossible to stop, but it's going to be some trouble. And it starts with, I'd say it's going to start with Baker Mayfield, because his ability to make plays on the move and scramble, not looking to necessarily run, doesn't run a lot, but his ability to get out of the pocket and get out of bad situations and create throws down the field was a problem for Washington in that first game. So they pressured him. I think depends on what stats you look at. It's funny because I've seen multiple different stats of how many pressures they actually had. I saw 12 pass rush wins, but I saw only 10 pressures. They had Washington. So I'm going to go with this with our true media stats, 10 pressures in that game. They had 7 games where they had more pressures on the quarterback. However, including 4 of the last 5. So they've been putting more pressure on the quarterbacks of late. But I think the other thing is, in that game, you could have had 4 or 5 sacks in that game. Now, a couple of them would have come on the same drive, and I think some of those drives, like one resulted in a pass out of the end zone. It was on 3rd down, so they kick a field goal, would have kicked a field goal anyways. Another one, it was on back-to-back plays that it was 2nd and 15, gets out of it, gets 2 yards, would have been, 3rd and long, but instead it was still 3rd and long, and he got 8 yards on a run, but they ended up kicking a field goal anyways. Now, maybe you could have pushed him out of field goal range if you got the sack on 2nd down, but the bottom line is, the point is, they still got points on those drives, and they're still in position to get points for sure. But there were definitely a handful of times where he's really good at eluding and ducking under pressure. Like, you talk to some of these defensive linemen, I don't think they understand how he gets away. And as Quinn said, you kind of have to treat him like a running back. In other words, you can't just assume because he's a quarterback, he's going to go down easily. He doesn't. He's really good. He's got he's got strong legs, but he's able to duck and maneuver almost like a boxer, kind of getting out of there sometimes. But he's really good at that, and I think he's quick with his reactions in the pocket. He's not a fast guy, but he does have quick reactions and feels that rush most of the time. Good, quick feet. So, but there were, like I said, probably about 4 or 5. They did get 1 sack. Cleveland Farrell had a sack. You had Louvu missed one. Wagner, I think, missed one. John Allen had a good pressure, drilled them on one. I think, all those guys seem to have one. He had Javonte Jean-Baptiste has him by the feet, but as he's going down, he flips it to a receiver. So, and I think it was incomplete, but the bottom line, there's nothing you can do about that one. Like, you have him at your feet, you're doing what you could, and because he wasn't able to get him otherwise, like, he had to go at his feet, and there's not much you can do, but he does such a good job of keeping his eyes up the field. The other thing is, too, as Joe Witt said, they didn't do a good job locking onto receivers in that game. You've got to do a better job of that, because when he scrambles, if you're not locking onto a guy, and there were a few times where they did not, that's going to cost you. So watch for that on Sunday night. How do they do there? The other thing is, I talked about all the pressures, but part of the reason it wasn't more is because they do get rid of the ball quick. In fact, here's some stats. His time in the pocket was 2.04 seconds. His time before throwing was 2.3 seconds. Both of those numbers were the fastest of any quarterback against Washington this year. That's how quickly they got rid of the ball. So I think, that's their game. And so you may not put a lot of pressure on him, but when you do, you've got to make some things happen. And he will throw some picks now. One of the knocks on Baker earlier in his career, I think he's kind of matured, but he liked to play hero ball. That was a knock. And I remember talking to a coach in the AFC North when he was in Cleveland, and that was his point. He's like, they know that if you can kind of goad him into that. So my thing would be with this offense is try to make him be very patient and drive down the field. So what are you going to take? Are you going to give up the Bucky Irving runs? And I'll get to Bucky Irving in a minute, but are you going to give up those runs, or you can't give up those explosive plays because that's what they're going to want. Make them, it's like any offense, but make them be patient, test them and their ability to stay patient and have to go on longer drives versus giving up these explosive plays. But it's funny because I was talking to one defensive player, and he said after they were rewatching the game the other day, it's like, again, they're such a different team. But after rewatching, he's like, they were pissed. And they were pissed at what they saw because they know, like, I don't think they liked watching because they know they are much better than what they were at that time. And there were things that we're seeing that, like, I think they were surprised at what they were doing wrong. You look at the secondary, there were a handful of coverage issues, but it was more so from communication or a missed assignment here or there. Maybe a safety's dropping too deep in a cover two, and this corner's not dropping enough, and you got a deep out that's open. You had a couple times on some switches, they may be the wrong guy. Maybe two guys go to one guy. It left Jalen McMillan wide open for a touchdown, and you got to get the safety coming over a little bit quicker, but the corner blew the coverage. So, like, those things haven't happened to the same degree it did in that game. Like, that was a consistent thing in that game where guys had some problems. And Quan Martin told me that there's just a better attention to detail right now.
I think it's just being more detailed, just being more intentional about, like, our communication and, not having those miscommunications or guys not getting calls. The secondary linebacker, so just being able to make sure guys are in the right position before the ball is snapped.
Is that trimming back some of what you're being asked to do, you think?
A little bit, and also just, like I said, just being more intentional about getting guys lined up and just make sure we're in a position to win pre-snap.
So there you go. So they're in a better spot now. Again, you've got to stop Bucky Irving too. And that's been a guy, if you listen to my interview with Jenna Lane on Friday, you know how good he is. And all you have to do is go look at his numbers. He's been really good down the stretch here for Tampa as they lost Godwin. They found their running game, and I think that's going to be a big thing to stop. But again, pick your poison because he can have some explosive runs, and he has. He does a really good job. I think they like to run some of those guard tackle pulls, and they'll use the jet action on those plays. So they're going to throw you some eye candy. And that's one of the big keys here is how does Washington handle the quote unquote eye candy in the movement of the run game? Because that's how he's going to get some of his 10+ yard runs. He's done a really good job with that too lately. It will cause hesitation. Can you get there? I think the other thing that he really does, he runs with good vision, but really good patience. Like, he is going to go and let those blocks set up. And then he's going to cut. When he cuts, he goes. So you have to be aware of that. That's how he's gotten some of those big runs. And he's able to squeeze through some narrow openings because I've seen that. Like, he had a long run, I think it was over 40 yards, where he's able to just kind of squeeze through a narrow opening, and he creates for himself by doing that. But he hits it fast, and I think that size works to advantage. He's not a tall guy, as you heard Jenna talk about on Friday, but I think but again, he can kind of hide behind the line a little bit, but he does, like I said, the best thing to me is he lets those blockers set up their block, or he helps set up their blocks by running with patience. He's not unstoppable. This is not, Derrick Henry, Barry Sanders in his prime, whatever, but he is a very effective back, and he does have the ability to break off some long ones for sure. Now, so you see all those successful runs. I've also seen some runs where they haven't produced as well. And sometimes it's because you're getting some backside pressure. Maybe you can just hold the point of attack play side a little bit. That backside can get there. You've got to get upfield on the ends and at least force them back to the help. But when you watch the linebackers have got to be able to fill gaps or fill those gaps aggressively, because if you don't, he's going to hit that for sure. So I think that's a big thing to stop here. Jalen McMillan has been very good lately. He's got 8 touchdowns, but I think 7 have come in like the last 6 games, something like that. His first touchdown was against Washington on a busted coverage. One of the things to watch with him, he's really good he's been really effective in the red zone, really effective in the red zone. So have to be there, very good against zone coverage. They'll run some stuff for him. Very good. They'll run a little rub route out of a bunch formation. He's going to line up inside and just rub off Mike Evans and get to the outside. He had a touchdown on that. He had a 29-yard tunnel screen touchdown against the blitz. So you just have to be careful. They're really good on those screens. Like the screen game in the first game was a problem, and I think they disguise it well. And they also run it well. You have to, because they run the ball so well, they know how to set up the screens off of that. And that's something to definitely watch for sure on Sunday, and they run a variety of screens. And I just pointed out one, but they run a lot to Rachaad White as well. He hurt Washington in the first game on those screens. So if they can handle the screen game, you're better off. There are a couple of times where I felt like, if the defensive lineman can recognize that just a little bit earlier, but they're not always giving it away. They're not always just letting everybody through. And so everybody knows it might be one guy's coming through and the rest are kind of breaking off, but you've got to be able to recognize that, but they run it well. And they might run like what looks like a bootleg action, just throwing it back on the screen. So you're getting the linebackers out of position as well. So, but definitely something to watch for sure. Again, make them drive long distance. Test Baker Mayfield's patience. Force him to try and play hero ball. Number 5, I think the Bucs D is vulnerable. They're very good against the run. And I think you can have some success throwing the ball on them. I think you know that. They're really good at applying some pressure. I think what helps here is Tyler Biadasz is going to play. That's having him back is a big return. Michael Dieter is okay, but Biadasz is just much better. Now, is he perfect? No, but he's a very good center. He's been very good for them, identifying the fronts. And I think, when little things like when this team wants to run motion, I think there's just more things you can do with Biadasz at center than you can with Dieter, just like maybe getting deeper into your run game, again, running more of your motions and some action, just a little bit more eye candy. Because when you have the eye candy and the defense shifts, well, that shifts responsibility. So you need to have a center who can go with it like that. And that's one of the things that Biadasz does really well. The Bucs will blitz. You know that. They blitz about 15 times a game. They've had 7 sacks on blitzes in the last 6 games. So it's not always getting home. They will give up big plays. But Tampa Bay is 22nd in total QBR. Opposing quarterbacks, or they're 22nd in opposing quarterback rating. How's that? Against the blitz. In other words, opposing quarterbacks do pretty well against them when throwing the ball against the blitz because they're going to get some yards. Only 6 touchdowns out of that too. But the bottom line is they will test you and they'll get after you. And so that's what Todd Bowles does. I don't think they're going to change much. They're going to get, the problem is, like, when will they get after you? That's, Wink Martindale from the Giants, we talked about this earlier in the week, was a lot more unpredictable, but Bowles has some of that as well. So that's one of the things to handle. They did confuse the line at times, a couple times in the first time. In fact, I remember one time Brandon Coleman, there was one blitz where you have, I think it was 5 guys ended up going, but you had a safety up on the outside and it looked like he was going to come. And then so Coleman steps to him, safety steps up and then back. You had the rest of the defensive line was slanting the other way. So the left guard is slanting inside as well to take his guy. And that created a gap for the linebacker to shoot through, and they get to Daniel. So you just have to be aware of that. Now, one of the drills I saw the linemen do this week as we were leaving the practice facility, this is not a state secret, it's not a big deal, but it was working on those kind of situations, like basically stepping to the guy who's not coming and then reacting quick to the other way. So in other words, like, okay, looks like this guy's coming, boom, you set, boom, he's not coming, now you're going over here. Just to get that in your head. So watch for that on Sunday and how they handle those situations. They do some stunts, they will do the zone blitzes, and they're good at that. Levante David is still a very effective run defender, and that's why I think they're so good against run. In fact, let's see. Let me see some run numbers here. They've only had, since week 10, 5 running backs have gained 10 yards or more in a game. Just 5, on a carry. So they've only allowed 5 carries of 10 yards or more 5 times in a game since week 10. but they only give up, I think it's like to running backs over this year, it's like 3.2 yards per carry to backs, maybe something like that. Maybe that's like since in the last, bottom line is they're really good against run. They're Vita Vea is a plug in the middle, but Levante Davis is an outstanding linebacker. Antoine Whitfield is a very good safety. But they do have, go back and listen to Jen and what they have going on in the secondary. It's depleted right now and it's vulnerable. And you saw that even in the first game. I'm telling you, there were multiple opportunities in that game for Washington to score more than 20 points. There was a deep ball missed to Terry McLaurin early in the second half that would have been a huge play for them. And there were other big plays, I think, that were available that weren't made, that they made in other games throughout the season, that I think you give them that same opportunity, those same looks again, I think they'll feel pretty good about it. So, I think there's a chance to really hurt them in that way. You don't have to have this great run game, but you need to stay ahead of the chains. You cannot get to 2nd and 10 all the time. You can't have the penalties. We know that. You can't be putting yourself in the hole, and you do not want to start off down 14-0 or 10-0 to the Bucks on the road when they can run the ball like they do and control the clock. So those are some things. But I think for Daniels, when you watch quarterbacks against them, like Bryce Young had a pretty good game against them a couple weeks ago because he's ready to throw. And that's what Daniels does. Be ready to throw because you know they're going to come, know what to do, and be very prepared. And I think that's one of the things that he does very, very well. So I could see Eckler having a big game on some screens as well. I think pass protection for the backs is a big deal. In fact, I reached out to someone who knows this team very well, has coached against the Bucks, and his comment was Robinson has to be consistent picking up the blitz, because in the past, this year I think he's been better with that, more consistent. In the past, I can tell you the coaching staff last couple of years didn't think he was consistent in that area. I think he's been better this year. So if you have a good job with the backs picking it up, you're in a good spot. And so that goes for Eckler, Jeremy McNichols as well when he gets in the game. But I do think this could be the kind of game where Eckler, I think, makes a bigger impact than even Robinson just overall. And I could be wrong on that, but it wouldn't shock me at all. So they have a chance to hit some plays down the field, folks. I think that's why they have a shot in this game for sure. I think it's going to be a fun game. I'm looking forward to it. It's fun just to be back in the playoffs. And I remember the first time I covered a playoff team was in 1999. And they played the Bucks. But the cool thing was the way that had been the first playoff game since the Gibbs era. And just the way the community responds to it. It's what makes it fun as a beat reporter. When people get excited about the team that you're covering, it just makes it more interesting to write about. People want to talk about it. Driving to the airport that time, and I'm seeing "Go Redskins," and you're seeing the signs in the windows at the airport, "Go Redskins." It's a cool time to have. So enjoy this. I think it's a start of many playoff years over however many years for the next 10 years, whatever. I think this is the start of a really good run for this franchise. There's no reason they can't win this game. I think, to me, Tampa Bay is a favorite, and I think they're the favorite for a reason. I think it's going to be a hard offense to stop. It is not an impossible offense to stop, and it is a defense that I think they can hurt them through the air and with Jaden Daniels' legs. And I'm really looking forward to watching Daniels in his first game in the playoffs as a pro. And it's funny because somebody asked me on the radio, like, do you think, how will he react in that game? Like, geez. The one thing I know about that person is that he responds well in these situations. Like, I would not feel comfortable if I'm Tampa Bay facing Jaden Daniels. So let's see what happens. Looking forward to it. Hope you enjoy it. Probably see some of you down there. And let's go from there, folks. Have fun. And I think it's going to be a fun one. So I'll talk to you after the game. It'll be early Monday morning, but I'll be there. Talk to you next time. Thank you for listening and watching.